Just within the last hour, Judge Riley Marchant told the Richmond School Board to produce to him a copy of the report for his review. You might remember that report was generated by a third-party probe into the shooting that happened outside of the Huguenot High School graduation on June 6th of last year. So far, the school board has declined to hand over that report publicly, but CBS 6 challenged their decision to keep it from the community. Our station recently joined the Richmond Times-Dispatch in filing a lawsuit to force the Richmond School Board to release to the public the investigative report concerning the tragedy, in which 2 people were killed, including a graduate, and several others were injured. The school board, if you remember, hired the law firm Sands Anderson to probe the shooting, and RPS has argued that attorney-client privilege should keep it from being released to the public. But we contend that privilege should not apply in this situation because the motivation behind the report was to get the facts about this shooting and about Richmond Public Schools' own operations, not to seek legal advice. Now, I took the witness stand today to outline how CBS 6 has closely followed the story from the start, and that in no official motions or public discussion of this third-party audit did the school board ever say that they were requesting legal services. Meanwhile, the school board argued that they always intended to keep this report confidential because they wanted to address their own civil liabilities. They called Superintendent Jason Camrus and School Board Chair Stephanie Rizzi to the stand, and both admitted that they went into this investigation process assuming that the report was privileged. Now, today we did speak with board members Jonathan Young, Kenya Gibson, and Dr. Shonda Harris Muhammad. She's the one who actually made this motion to begin with to initiate that investigation. We talked to them after the hearing. They were subpoenaed to court here today, but never ended up taking the stand. Take a listen.
I didn't expect that the outcome of the audit was going to be rendered through some form of legal advice. That was not the discussion. And my motion and rationale and discussion of the motion, all 3 parts were clear.
It should be obvious to everyone that the public has a right to know what happened on June 6th at the Altria Theater.
Ultimately, it's my understanding that the argument is that the report was legal counsel, and I couldn't disagree with that assertion anymore. I can tell you I supported releasing the audit to the public because our job as board members is to protect students.
And now I do want to note today that under oath, neither Superintendent Jason Camrus nor the school board chair Stephanie Rizzi could definitively say that contained in this report is actually legal advice. Now, the judge says that he would like to review this report over the weekend. And his remarks, he says it's very important to read it line by line to ensure that not too broad of a brush was used to withhold it in its entirety. The judge says he will be issuing a written opinion no later than Thursday. Here outside the courthouse, I'm Tyler Lane, CBS 6 News. Richmond Circuit Court Judge Riley Marchant has ordered the school board to release that external investigation it initially tried to withhold. In my hand right here is the judge's opinion, in which he is giving the school board until tomorrow at 1 o'clock to send us the document. You might recall CBS 6 joined the Richmond Times-Dispatch in a lawsuit against the school board, alleging that it violated the Freedom of Information Act by keeping this report private. A law firm was hired to complete the probe into the June 6th Huguenot High School graduation shooting, where 2 people died, including a graduate, and several others were injured after the ceremony. But the school board claimed that the entire report was confidential due to attorney-client privilege. The probe was intended to scrutinize the school district's handling of graduation day operations and the processes leading up to it, in which multiple sources have told CBS 6 there were missteps and failures on RPS's end. Now, we argued our case in court on Friday, where I did take the stand. We presented evidence showing that the school board never asked for or intended for this report to contain legal advice. And in the official motions and public discussion, board members never once requested legal services. Judge Marchant reviewed the report for himself, and he agreed. Take a look. He says, quote, "The court finds that the school board failed to carry out its burden to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the the entire report and its exhibits are protected from disclosure under the attorney-client privilege. The report, taken as a whole, was not created for the purpose of providing legal advice, and the express terms of the resolution upon which the report is based are very clear in that regard. The judge says that there are several minimal parts of the report that do constitute legal advice, and those parts of the document will be redacted. We have reached out tonight to several board members to get their reaction to this ruling. You're going to hear from Kenya Gibson and Jonathan Young. Those are two board members who have been consistently outspoken about releasing the report. Take a listen.
The judge has more wisdom than the school board of the city of Richmond. Granted, that's a pretty low bar, but thank God that this judge ruled in favor of transparency, and candidly, all of our stakeholders in RPS in the city of Richmond have a right to know how their district failed them, and failed them in a big way. The city of Richmond as a whole will demand accountability for repeated failures, for a complete disregard for student welfare. And
Amen. I'm thrilled. You know, as it pertains to the ruling, I'm not surprised because it was clear. It was evident. This was never about protecting the district. This was about protecting the students. It was about protecting the staff and making sure that we don't make this happen again. All I can say is thank you to press, including CBS 6 and the Richmond Times-Dispatch, for doing the work that the school board should have done.
Now, in a statement, Superintendent Jason Camrus tells me that he and School Board Chair Stephanie Rizzi welcomed the release of the report after fighting us in court about it, and they will have a full statement tomorrow. In the studio, I'm Tyler Lane, CBS 6 News.
CBS 6 News at 6 starts with a breaking news alert.
It was one of the most shocking tragedies of 2023. Now we're learning startling new details about the events surrounding a deadly graduation day shooting in Richmond. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janine Samuels.
And I'm Bill Fitzgerald, live in Monroe Park. CBS 6 and the Richmond Times-Dispatch went to court to force Richmond Public Schools to release a report which contains the findings of a third-party investigation into last year's Huguenot High School graduation ceremony right here at the Altria Theater, just steps from where I'm standing. Now, here are three major revelations. The Huguenot graduate who was killed, Sean Jackson, was allowed to attend the ceremony without proper vetting or consideration of the safety and security concerns associated with his attendance. The school system's own threat assessment policy and its guidance were seemingly ignored, despite multiple voiced concerns from the victim's mother over the last several years to school officials. In addition, there was minimal security inside and outside this theater, which became an issue when the shooting began and people started to run for their lives. Now, we have team coverage of all of the elements of this developing story tonight. In just a moment, our Elizabeth Holmes will take an in-depth look at the on-site security breakdown. And Crime Insider John Burkett speaks exclusively with one of the survivors. But we start tonight with Tyler Lane, who testified on behalf of our effort to make this report public. And Tyler, the investigation seems to show systemic failure on multiple levels.
Yeah, that's right, Bill. The findings here in my hand, there are dozens of pages. They show that Huguenot High School staff who allowed that student who was shot and killed to attend the ceremony that day, they knew that there were several really big and significant safety concerns surrounding his participation. However, this report notes that there were several failures to adhere to policies and procedures that are in place that are supposed to be keeping students safe. Now in the public's hands is the Richmond School Board's third-party investigation report into the June 6 Huguenot High School graduation shooting, which claimed the lives of graduate Sean Jackson and his stepfather. Several others were injured. The school district only releasing these findings after a judge ordered them to, siding with CBS 6 and the Richmond Times-Dispatch in our lawsuit.
It's clear that there were some missteps.
Jackson was a homebound student at the time, meaning he was not permitted to be in school buildings or at school-sponsored events per policy. He was homebound due to the threat of neighborhood violence, and numerous staff, including his counselor and principal, were very aware of safety and security issues surrounding the student. In previous communications, Jackson's mother told staff and Superintendent Jason Camrus that their home was shot up by students in Huguenot, but Central Office staff never referred this information to security personnel. 4 months before the shooting, his mother told the counselor after Jackson was allowed into the Huguenot school building for a test, "I thought he would be isolated. He was in class with people who literally tried to kill him." Then, just days before the shooting, his mother asked the counselor if he should participate in graduation rehearsal or if he would just be squeezed in the day of. The counselor replied, "I will just squeeze him in if you feel that it's too dangerous." No threat assessment was ever conducted prior to June 6th, and those who did have knowledge of safety concerns kept that to themselves and did not act on it, per the investigation. Despite Superintendent Camrus's initial report saying that the counselor approved Jackson's attendance on behalf of the principal, investigators found no evidence to support that statement. The report says that the principal had no direct involvement with Jackson's participation, and he was described as checked out and took a laissez-faire approach to managing the building, according to the RPS chief academic officer. Ultimately, the report says that the students' participation in graduation occurred without any consideration of or adherence to required authorizations and without proper vetting and consideration of the safety concerns that were known by several members of Huguenot High School. Here's reaction from school board members Jonathan Young and Kenya Gibson.
Our first and foremost responsibility has always, above all else, has got to be to protect our students and our teachers. This report demonstrates we did not do that. Not only did we not do that, but the school board of the city of Richmond attempted to sweep this under the rug, to cover it up.
The response that we've gotten has been, it simply falls short. Obviously, the district did take some steps in terms of the next graduations that happened, but ultimately, I'm eager to get more definitive direction in terms of how can we make sure this doesn't happen again.
Earlier in the day, before the report was released, CBS 6 tried to ask Superintendent Jason Camrus and School Board Chair Stephanie Rizzi about it. Mr. Camrus, we were wondering if we just get a comment on the report being released today.
As I said yesterday, I welcome the release of the report, and we'll have a full statement when it's released at 1 o'clock.
I'm going to just go with what the superintendent is going to release later today, okay?
And the superintendent and the school board chair statement reads in part, "Our shared commitment is to learn from this tragedy and continue to improve in order to further safeguard our students and staff." They say they've already made multiple improvements as far as policy and procedure changes moving forward. That full statement is on WTVR.com. Bill?
Actually go back.
All right, Tyler, now you have filed multiple Freedom of Information Act requests before, and this time you ended up in court. What was that process like?
Well, Bill, honestly, it was a long process. It took a lot of time, energy, resources, lawyers. I mean, you have to imagine I submitted my first FOIA request in the beginning of November. Here we are mid-January, and we're finally getting this report. So it took a lot of time, but it was something that we were happy to do because we do this job because we believe that our public and our community that we serve has a right to know, and they deserve to see this information for themselves.
Well, and Tyler, you were actually in court testifying in this case. What was that like?
Well, I mean, it was certainly a unique experience, something I've never done before. I was in the stand for almost 2 hours, and we basically just outlined the facts here. I walked the court through all of my emails back and forth with the school board. We showed them all the FOIA requests that we had sent. We watched the school board meetings, and we presented our case that this report was never intended to be kept from the public and that our community deserved these answers and this information, to which obviously the judge agreed.
And briefly, Tyler, you're now going to go back to work seeing these same officials. Presumably no awkwardness there after this whole process played out?
No, Bill, I don't think so. I mean, FOIA is just a basic function of our government, and I believe that we'll just continue moving forward, getting information, getting records like this so that we can keep our public informed.
All right, thank you for that, Tyler, and for your good reporting. Now to the on-site security on graduation day. Now, the report says there was sparse staffing inside the Altria and only a handful of police officers and firefighters outside the building. This despite more than 3,600 people in attendance. And as our Elizabeth Holmes tells us, there are conflicting reports about the use of metal detectors that day. Liz?
Bill, that's right. There are three big things that I want to talk about. First, this report says that there was no discussion about any kind of safety plans or procedures once people actually left the Altria Theater. And as you said, there were some conflicting reports about whether or not the metal detectors in there worked and even where they were. Now, the Altria Theater and its contracting company, RMC, they did not comply with this review. They did not give any information, allow anyone to talk about this. So that is posing more questions about what actually happened on this day. This is the breakdown of security responsibility for Huguenot High School's graduation at the Altria Theater. According to the report, the theater's contracted security team, RMC, would take the lead on personnel and security equipment inside the building. Then Richmond Public Schools safety and security team would be a second layer. Then Richmond Police and Fire would come third. Page 5 of the document says the school's 2 school resource officers, who may have had knowledge of any possible safety concerns with students, were not working at the graduation. 19 RPS care and safety workers were in attendance, but were not permitted to conduct searches or control metal detectors, which was RMC's job. 5 off-duty police officers and 3 off-duty fire and EMS staff were hired by RPS, meant to serve as additional support for the roughly 3,600 people who were there. According to the report, the school system did not have a director of safety and security while planning graduation. That role was filled June 7th, the day after the shooting. There were 3 different entrances to the Altria on graduation day: a front entrance for visitors, a graduate entrance, and a VIP entrance. Page 15 says the VIP entrance would be the only one that did not have metal detectors, but would be staffed to check credentials. However, it is, quote, unknown if anyone was posted at the VIP entrance. On that same page, a comment by Assistant Principal Kevin Monroe, who said he went through the graduates entrance wearing a belt and carrying his cell phone, said the metal detector, quote, should have went off, but didn't. The report goes on to say that there were sightings of students coming into the building late and conflicting reports of if they went through metal detectors or not. Student Sean Jackson, who was shot and killed outside the theater after graduation, was reportedly late. One interview saying that he, quote, probably just found a spot and jumped in line. Much remains unclear about if the metal detectors worked or where they were, as well as how Jackson got into the building, as the report says the Altria did not allow investigators to walk through the building nor agree to provide video footage or any kind of staff to be interviewed. Now, we reached out to the Altria Theater. Again, they contract with RMC for security. We wanted to see if they would comment on this report, and we have not heard back from them at this time. Bill?
All right, thanks, Elizabeth.
The information and the findings that came to light within the investigation were so disheartening, and they were actually scary.
Charlene Riley, a mother of 3 children in Richmond Public Schools, describes her reaction reading the third-party investigation report into the Huguenot High School graduation day shooting.
I'm outraged, and mainly I'm shocked because we knew that administrators and teachers, and we knew that the school counselor and at least the principal were aware of the threats that were being made, and they chose to ignore them.
The report revealed numerous Huguenot High School staff members were aware of a multitude of safety concerns surrounding Sean Jackson, the homebound student who was shot and killed after the June 6 ceremony. It says his mother warned his counselor that being physically in school was very unsafe, that Huguenot students shot up their home, and that kids literally tried to kill him. Despite this, investigators found that school staff never completed a threat assessment, did not escalate security issues, and allowed Jackson at the graduation against required authorizations and without any consideration of known safety concerns.
Right now, I would like immediate accountability from the superintendent. And the school system is failing the students. They're bringing the violence and the things from in the streets into the school.
CBS 6 has identified several inconsistencies in information that was originally released to the public by RPS versus what we know now. Superintendent Jason Cameron's first report said that a counselor approved Jackson's graduation attendance as a designee of the principal, but investigators found the counselor never even spoke to the principal. Cameron also told school board members that Jackson was homebound for mental health reasons, but investigators found he was also homebound due to the threat of neighborhood violence. And RPS told me in a July statement that they acted in accordance with protocol by not completing a threat assessment prior to Jackson's attendance at the graduation because, quote, there were no reported safety concerns. However, investigators found that staff failed to initiate a threat assessment based off information that should have triggered one per policy. Do you think that, there was misleading information that was initially put out?
I'll say at this point that initial report seemed very incomplete, especially to those of us who experienced the event, which is why we reached out to get, someone to do a deeper investigation.
School Board Chair Stephanie Rizzi spoke exclusively with CBS 6 Thursday. She initially fought the release of the report, citing a desire to protect the identities of RPS employees who participated in the investigation and were promised confidentiality.
And from what I'm hearing, there are a lot of upset people now at Huguenot and district-wide. Because we didn't deliver on that promise.
How do you expect that the board and the administration will be moving forward from this as far as any accountability measures or continued improvements to procedure and safety?
There are going to be definitely, we're going to take a really close look at procedures. We, the district has invested in a lot of security devices and initiatives that we will start to definitely implement immediately. In terms of specific accountability, I can't answer that. I don't know.
Do you believe that there are internal operational gaps, and as you guys move forward, that's something that you have to address?
I think that there are a lot of operational gaps. I think that there are really, honestly, cases where, employees are not sure exactly how to report things, who to report them to, what the actual chain of command is.
Do you think that this could have been prevented?
I talk to a lot of people about that, and most of the people I talk with say that, if someone has been determined to do something like this, they will most likely find a way. What I can tell you is that on the RPS side, we will work as hard as we can to tighten protocols, to look at our policies, and to look at what happens on the ground to make sure that we do everything we can to prevent something like this.
Now, regarding some of the inconsistencies between the two reports about the incident, an RPS spokesperson said that previous initial statements were made in real time as investigations were developing. They say at the time they thought they were providing the most accurate and complete information, but they apologized that it wasn't completely accurate. They were working with limited time and resources. In Richmond, I'm Tyler Lane, CBS 6 News.